Good morning. I'm going to continue the book of Vimala Thakar, What is Meditation? And this is a talk she gave in India in 1987. And she says, up till now, the inquiry was with the help of an effort. Now the inquiry will enter the dimension of effortlessness. Silence is effortlessness. Silence is effortless alertness. So the I consciousness says, I'm not going to observe. My observation brought me to the fact of the mechanical nature of my movement. So I stop. Does the stopping take place in your life? The integrity and the genuineness of inquiry requires this questioning of oneself. Have we ever allowed the whole movement of the mind to stop? Not when you're sitting in your room, but when you're moving through relationships. Has one ever experimented with the present absolutely, defenselessly? Defenselessly means without the defense of the past. The past is a kind of defense, and its movement is like a security. Now, the psyche is filled with silence, not filled with thoughts, concepts, ideas, theories, impulses, and conclusions. You know all that is gone now. Now the emptiness of consciousness is filled with silence. One says it is filled with silence because silence is an energy. If you had heard the speaker some time ago, you might have heard the words energy gets stimulated in silence. The new energy of intelligence gets stimulated into silence. No, as it was pointed out earlier, the speaker is still growing, learning. Life is infinite. Until the last breath, the learning shall continue. So there may be changes in expression. I say silence is energy. The moment you allow your movement, the movement of the ego, to discontinue, not out of tension, pressure, but out of understanding, then relaxation takes place. If that relaxation takes place, then the emptiness of consciousness is filled with silence. That energy is uncorrupted, unmutilated, unfragmented, unindividuated. Now observation or perception takes place out of the emptiness of consciousness, out of that silence. The energy of silence perceives through the eyes. The energy of silence listens through the ears. That energy is not an identity like me, the ego. It fills your whole being. There is an observation without the observer. Observation without the observer is the state of wholeness of perception and wholeness of response. So, observation without the observer is the state of wholeness of perception and wholeness of response. Inquiry moved from the theoretical to the practical, where it was still a movement of the I consciousness. You started learning observation. Still, it was a movement of the I consciousness. That movement has stopped. Again, a quantum leap. Now, observation becomes a movement of the spontaneity. When the cool breeze moves in and out of the room, who is there? Is there an entity? The breeze that comes and soothes your body and relaxes you completely. Is there someone who is blowing the breeze towards you? It's a movement of the breeze. It's natural. So observation as a dimension of your whole life becomes a movement of the spontaneity of that wholeness. Inquiry as a movement of the mind has stopped. You see if the state of observation, the dimension of observation, is allowed to open up in your being. Then inquiry as an intellectual movement, as a mental movement, as a movement of investigation by the I consciousness, exploration by the I consciousness has ended. Has it ended? Or would one like to carry on the mental movement? Because it is purified by observation, would one like to carry it on for experiencing non-sensual, occult, and transcendental experiences and powers? One can do it if one wants to. It has nothing to do with religion. You can begin to cash in on the new faculty that you may have. As you cash your intellect, your music, your talents, you sell them. So you can begin to sell this new capacity of the consciousness of observing and not allow it to go into non-action. This is what happens to most of us. After having understood the repetitive and mechanical movement of the I, will we not carry on with it? People come to this point of learning, of observation, and they still cling on to the mental movement. Their mind, their ego, their thought structure says, beware, if you leave me, it is a leap in the dark. It is a leap in the unknown. Who is going to guide you? What will happen to you? Don't do it. Don't take this jump. Stand here, stay here. Find out prayers, find out bhajans, chant them, create a new feeling of sensitivity with them. Turn away from sensual experiences to the transcendental. And my friends, the intoxication of the transcendental is much deeper than the intoxication of sexual experiences. The mind turns away from the worldly things and indulges in the so-called non-worldly, non-sensual. It indulges in the occult, the transcendental, the invisible. It wants to play around with techniques and methods, awakening the kundalini, the Shaktipad, the sensation of experiencing. One creates new patterns and looks upon it as a religious life. I know you maybe won't agree with me, but may I dare to say that as long as the mental movement goes on, there is no religion. You may create a new relationship, new areas of relationship with the guru, or a method, you can select patterns and hang on to them, cling to them, use it as a crutch because there is reluctance to completely let go. The total relaxation of the mental movement is the death of the ego. There is the fear that I will be destroyed. One is not as much afraid of the physical death as one is afraid of the psychological death, the death of the ego, the discontinuity of the movement of I, because the movement of the ego has been equated with the movement of life. So she says, the total relaxation of the mental movement is the death of the ego. There is the fear that I will be destroyed. One is not as much afraid of the physical death as one is afraid of the psychological death, the death of the ego, the discontinuity of the movement of I. Because the movement of the ego has been equated with the movement of life. And the total relaxation is being equated with death of the ego. And that fear holds you back. We have come to the point of effortlessness of the ego. Now further inquiry, if at all it could be called inquiry, would be the movement of the effortlessness, would be the movement of the silence, would be the movement of inquiry into the mystery of life. I read this last little bit one more time. The total relaxation of the mental movement is the death of the ego. There is the fear that I will be destroyed. One is not as much afraid of physical death as one is afraid of psychological death, the death of the ego, the discontinuity of the movement of I. Because the movement of the ego, the movement of the I, has been equated with the movement of life. And the total relaxation is being equated with death of the ego. And that fear holds you back. We have come to the point of effortlessness of the ego. Now further inquiry, if at all it could be called inquiry, would be the movement of the effortlessness, would be the movement of the silence, would be the movement of the inquiry into the mystery of life. So what is meditation? Meditation is the essence of spirituality. You do not have to do anything but to educate your physical organism and psychological structure to move into non-action gracefully, voluntarily, and see what happens in that state of non-action. Into non-action we move, and once there, things happen by themselves. It is the cosmic intelligence that takes over the charge of your being. So what is meditation? I read it again. Meditation is the essence of spirituality. You do not have to do anything but to educate your physical organism and psychological structure to move into non action gracefully, voluntarily, and see what happens in that state of non action. Into non action we move, and once there, things happen by themselves. It is the cosmic intelligence that takes over the charge of our being. Well, this is the end of this beautiful book on meditation by Vimala. So I hope you enjoyed it. I did very much. And I'm gonna stop reading for a little while. I'm going on little holidays. I won't have a full month of holiday. That would be lovely. But I have some days here and there, so it's going to be choppy, and I'm not always going to have access to the internet. So I'm going to begin reading again on the 1st of September. And I hope you have a great month. Maybe you continue listening or reading to Vimala by yourself. I certainly will, because I've loved these readings of her very much. Somehow they're really, it's material that I've heard many, many years ago, but to revisit them is, I find incredibly enriching. So I wish you a great month, and then maybe see you on the 1st of September. So bye for now.